I'm Joy. Nice to meet you. You haven't got a choice of hands, do you? What did you do to it?
You've only got to watch author Joy Cowley with children to see her magic at work. She's New Zealand's most prolific children's author, with hundreds of books to her credit. A committed Christian, one of her most recent books was for a project by the Bible Society, which will see it placed in just about every school in the country. It's about Tarore, the little Maori girl in the early 19th century whose love for God was a beacon of hope for New Zealand's future. Children just love her. They love the way she writes for them. They love the way she talks to them.
The basics of reading almost missed me until I was 9, and then I discovered that reading actually is story. I loved story. In those days, of course, there was no other means of story because we didn't have television in those days. So I found that I could, as often as I opened a book, I could enter new lives. Whoever said you only live once wasn't a reader.
Because your family weren't academic in any way?
No, they weren't. My dear parents struggled. They were both ill. My mother had schizophrenia and my father had heart disease. So we lived on a pension. They had 5 children and life wasn't easy for them. But we learned a lot of life skills early when we were young. We had to, and I was the eldest. So in some ways it was a very rich childhood.
So how did you start writing professionally?
Well, I graduated very slowly through children's pages. When I was in my last year at high school, when I was 16, I had to earn money for home, for my parents. So I had a job, the teachers got me a job as a children's page editor on a newspaper. I did that after school. So that's when I was introduced to writing for children. And then, of course, later on when I was married and I had 4 young children very rapidly, and I wrote short stories and thought if I got one published in the Listener, I would die happy.
But in the end, you had one published that was spotted by a publisher in New York.
That's
Doubleday.
right, yes. And
it is fairly unusual, isn't it, for a New York publisher like Doubleday to get in touch with a farmer's wife in New Zealand.
Very unusual. She picked up a magazine in Grand Central Station and wrote and said, do you have a novel? Well, of course, when an American publisher asks that, you think very rapidly. And I said, I'm thinking about it. Well, I was. I thought about it for about 2 days and then decided I couldn't. But 6 months later came back another letter saying, how's that novel coming along? So I wrote what I thought was a rather long short story, and well, it was a long short story, but I thought it could be a first chapter for a novel, and sent it to her. And absolute delight and horror, back came an agreement for the novel and half the advance royalty.
Now, your adult books are very adult. They're about marital infidelity and mental illness and death.
Well, they were quite bleak, really, but then that was, well, you know, when people start writing seriously, it does tend to be serious. It's what I call therapy writing. We tend to address any trauma that we've had in our lives. And I'm very glad that I wrote those before I went into children's writing.
So how did you move from there to children's books?
Well, I told and wrote stories for my own children, and then got more serious about it when I had a son who wasn't reading, for different reasons than me. He was a child who didn't relate to fantasy or fiction. And I worked with him, with other children in the school and schools nearby. So that's how I came committed to children's reading, early reading materials.
Now, you're supposed to take a break from writing adult literature for 5 years. So,
that's right.
So what went wrong?
A 5-year break to write an early reading program for children, for New Zealand teachers until the Learning Media published their program. But it caught on, and I've been doing that for a long time now, and in various countries.
So what's the attraction of writing for children?
Oh, they are so honest. You know, I take manuscripts into schools and trial them with children, and they tell me exactly what they think. I once had 4 manuscripts in a Blenheim school, and 2 passed muster, 1 needed changing, 1 I liked it. It was a message story and it didn't get anywhere. I said, what's wrong with that story? And the boy in front of me said, it's boring. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I can rewrite it, recycle it. So I said, which part of it is boring? He said, all of it. And he was right, you know, I got trashed.
You converted to Catholicism more than 20 years ago now.
Oh, yes, but you know, I've been a Christian all my life, and I've been a searcher all my life. And that was just where God took me.
It's unusual though, isn't it? Because Christians often come the other way out of the Catholic Church into other denominations, and you went the other way.
We have different maps for our journey, don't we? The journey is the same for all of us, it's the same destination, and our maps tend to be cultural. And I find that the Catholic Church is a very broad umbrella. It covers a wide range of people in different stages. And the map is there, but I write my own notes all over it. We all do that, don't we? Life experience teaches us to write on our maps, whatever they are. And I might find that, well, there's a well mentioned here on the map and it's run dry, but I found a little spring over there that's wonderful. And I write that on my map. So, and there might be a mountain that's got a path that goes around it, and I find that if I go over the top of the mountain, it's a lot harder, but the views are better. So eventually we end up with that lovely traditional Christian map, the faith family that we worship with, but it's also individual. We've got our own notes written all over it, where the Spirit has taken us.
Now, you were made a distinguished companion of the New Zealand Order of Merit, and yet you turned down the opportunity to turn that into a dame. I could be talking to Dame Joy now, but you decided not to.
I place great value on my ordinariness. And besides, I go into schools and the kids say, "G'day, Joy. Hey, Joy, you want to read my story? Hey, Joy, see you later." Would I change that for anything? No.